We are here to talk about military executions. To do so, we will interview 3 men that were in the Great War. These men each have different stories to tell and were all different rankings in the war. We have one soldier who was in the firing squad that will tell us about his experience, one soldier that had first-hand experience with shell shock, as a lot of the army suffered from it, and lastly we have a different view on execution, a general who believes that the executions were necessary.
Our goal is to show a different perspective of the war and the military executions that took place throughout the war. Executions in World War I used a firing squad. The firing squad consists of 12 soldiers who altogether shoot the victim of the execution. Some of the soldiers in the firing squad were under the ages of 16, and so were some of the soldiers that were executed. In the next interview, you will have a man who was in the firing squad himself, who speaks about the devastating executions.
We are now joined with a soldier who was recently serving in the Great War. Yet today we want to discuss the position he held in the firing squad. Welcome, James Lawrence. Now tell me, what was it like in the firing squad?
It was very tough. When we would stand in front of a soldier, it was extremely hard to shoot many times. We would often put ourselves in the position of the other soldier. In the end, this is a very hard job, and you don't want your emotions to get in the way.
Is there any time you recall when you really struggled to pull the trigger?
Yes, many times, but one in particular. The 11 men and I were called in by an officer who told us about a new execution. As soon as I found out, I was devastated. This was a 16-year-old. He was only a child. He had lied about his age to be in the army, yet when he signed the contract, he didn't know it was coming. I remember when I looked at the other men in the firing squad right before the execution, they were petrified.
In the end, did you shoot the man?
We did as we were asked. We each shot him. Most of us aimed for the legs. The soldiers did not die straight away. The general walked towards a severely injured man and finished the job. I did not sleep many nights after that. I always had the soldiers in my head. I have a younger sibling of that age. That could have been his fate.
Sir, do you feel as if the executions are fair?
Most of the time, I do not. I believe that if someone has committed an extreme crime, such as killing your own man, they deserve an execution, yet many of the times they are given to innocent men. A victim does not have a proper reason to be executed, yet there is no way that we can speak about it to a general.
I have heard that for some executions there is such thing as a blank cartilage. Could you possibly explain this?
Yes, there is. An officer gives few soldiers a weapon with blank cartilage. None of us are told beforehand who the person without the cartilage is. Therefore, the point is that then we have a chance of not killing the soldier. We actually have hope. This method makes us feel less guilty, since that is the reason that the soldiers in the firing squad refused to shoot.
Have you ever had an execution with a blank cartilage?
I have a few times. The officers tend to use this method when they suspect that we may not shoot. For example, they use this method when we have younger soldiers who don't deserve the death penalty.
Have you ever had a moment in which you didn't shoot?
No, I have not. The general watched us, and if we did not shoot, there were serious consequences. I've had my many moments in which I could not bring myself to shoot at first, but I had to in the end.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for being here with us. I hope that now that the war is over, you will live the life you deserve.
My pleasure.
Shell shock is a mental instability that is now known as post-traumatic stress disorder. In the First World War, it wasn't known yet because it was new. Many of the soldiers in World War I reacted to the trauma of the war by shell shock. Shell shock can often result in the soldier losing their capacity to obey orders, and in many given cases, it causes a soldier to be court-martialed, and, if pled guilty, executed.
A former soldier of the British Army, William Chapman, is going to be telling us about his experience in the war and how shell shock affected him and his former colleagues. Hello, sir.
Yes, hello. Pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now tell us, how was it having to deal with shell shock soldiers? Could you see the mental breakdown throughout time, or was it more of a sudden change?
It was definitely hard to see the soldiers experience the trauma of shell shock. I definitely believed it changed them throughout a long period of time. For example, in the beginning, it was just shaking and stuttering. when they spoke, but towards the end, some of the soldiers could barely even control what they were saying, and in some cases, they lost control of their mental stability. I remember during the war one night, I saw one of the younger soldiers from my troop who suffered from insomnia. I remember waking up to yelling, and I noticed that he actually grabbed a box of our hand grenades. He was threatening the other soldiers. But it was a hard time for the poor lad. You could tell he wasn't in control of his body at all. But the officers didn't take much care into that when they decided to execute him out on the field.
Have you ever been affected by shell shock?
Any lad would be lying if they said they hadn't been affected by it. The war will completely wreck your senses, and you'll feel it throughout time. The only thing is, some people are not as lucky as others, and they'll be much more affected to the point they'll be diagnosed with shell shock. Of course, our generals didn't want to believe it, so they'd often just be told they were disobeying orders or something along those lines.
Were you ever diagnosed with shell shock yourself?
I was once told by one of my officers that I need to go for an examination with one of my doctors. I remember I was awfully stuttery, and I suffered from insomnia. But I was tested negatively. It was really a relief. I didn't want to have to leave the war that soon.
And have you ever experienced anything that was a life or death situation?
I do remember my worst night in the war. I was on night watch shift. I was extremely tired. I haven't slept in 2 days. I must have drifted off to sleep. All I remember was waking up to talking. I finally woke up completely to hear two of my officers talking about me. One was questioning if I'd fallen asleep, which, if I have, would have been against the rules, and I would have been in a lot of trouble. But then the other one said that he just spoke to me asking to borrow a pencil. So the first officer just left it.
So that officer really probably saved your life that night.
Yeah, I was really lucky to have someone that actually had some moral sensitivity left in them.
Well, once again, thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
It was my pleasure.
The ranking in the First World War played a major role to someone's view. The last two interviews showed the view of someone who was against these executions. The next interview will show the view of a general who believes that the executions were right.
Now we would like to welcome a brave general from the Great War, General Henry Martin. Sir, we would like to know, how was the experience of the Great War?
I believe that it is tragic that we have lost so many lives of our soldiers. Yet the families of those brave men should know that they have heroically died serving for their country.
Sir, do you believe that the war was necessary, or the soldiers died for nothing?
I do believe that the war was indeed necessary. Without such a war, there would have been anarchy throughout all of the countries.
Sir, we would like to talk to you about the executions held during this war. Do you believe that these soldiers who fought so hard for their country deserve such punishment?
I do believe that, without the right punishment, there will be nothing learned. These executions were merely held to show the other soldiers what would happen to them if they do not follow our rules.
What were most executions held for?
We had a lot of executions held for desertion and cowardice. A soldier is not permitted to leave the area assigned to him. If this is done, he receives a court-martial, and if pled guilty and sentenced to death, the execution will happen as stated. The fate is the same if pleaded guilty for cowardice. Our men are brave and are not afraid of fighting for one's country.
It has now recently been found that many soldiers were suffering from shell shock, which is believed to be a mental disorder in reaction to the trauma of the war. These soldiers have often deserted their post or have been executed for cowardice. Is this correct, sir?
I do not believe in such thing as shell shock. That is only an excuse for being a coward, and many people have tried to use it and fake it, just like they fake injuries. I will not stand by such thing.
Sir, I've also been informed that many younger soldiers have been executed for cowardly behavior, even soldiers of 18 and younger. What would you say about that?
I believe that it is wrong for a man to not fight for his country, if that is what he signed up for. By executing these men, we show that no matter your age, there will be consequences for not following the orders.
Some of these soldiers were even 16.
I know, and I think it is wrong to lie about one's age. If you sign up to fight amongst these other men, You will not have any special treatment regarding your age. Everyone that signs up to fight should have known what they were in for.
Overall, do you believe that it's right to execute every single one of the soldiers?
Yes, without the executions, the soldiers wouldn't have any real guidelines to follow, and the war would have been filled with men doing whatever they please, which is not right. In my opinion, the executions were what kept the British Army obedient and strong.
Thank you for your time, General Henry Martin.
It was my pleasure.